Welcome back to Morbidium, where the stories don't fade, they linger. Last season, we walked through the shadows, unsolved disappearances, fractured timelines, unanswered questions that still echo through the dark. But this season, we go deeper into the files that were closed too soon, the voices that were silenced, the truths that were buried beneath over fear and time. This isn't just true crime, it's the anatomy of what lingers after. Every case we tell carries weight for the victims, for the families, and for the communities left searching for peace. And as our audience continues to grow, so does our responsibility to tell these stories with integrity, empathy, and relentless curiosity. Season 3 is about unfinished business, cold cases that refuse to stay cold, mysteries that unravel when you pull the close thread, and the chilling realization that sometimes the most terrifying thing isn't what happened, it's what didn't. So dim the lights, lock the doors, and lean in close, because the truth is out there, and we're not done looking. This is Morbidium.
All right, so today we're heading to San Diego, which normally, when you say San Diego, you're thinking sunshine, surfing, beaches, people jogging with their dogs.
I couldn't agree more. It's got the whole postcard vibe, beautiful coastline, sunset, surfers. My dad used to sail out of there. It's a gorgeous place.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we are not here for the tourism brochure version today, which I'm sure anyone listening knows that's not what we do. The story we're going to cover today involves two brutally murdered teenage girls 6 years apart on the same beach.
Well, that was cute. My dog needed to chime in on that one, but it's really serious because when you first hear the details, your brain immediately goes, "Oh, this is the same killer." Like it feels pretty obvious.
Right. I mean, it was the same location, similar victims, extremely disturbing crime details. You'd think investigators would look at that and just go, yeah, that's definitely connected.
But somehow, despite the similarities, police said there wasn't enough evidence to link them, which is honestly one of the more infuriating parts of the whole story.
Yeah, because when one case eventually gets solved and the other is still sitting there like an unsolved puzzle, that nobody quite finished.
So, the place all of this happened is Torrey Pines State Beach. And if you've never seen it, it is stunning.
Yeah, I had to go and look it up. And we're talking proper California postcard kind of stuff. Cliffs overlooking the ocean, long stretches of sand, surfers everywhere.
So, back in the 70s and 80s, it was also a really popular place for teenagers to hang out at night. They had bonfires, music, late night beach trips.
Which honestly sounds like the most 1970s teenage activity imaginable. Just a bunch of teenagers sitting around a fire going, yeah, the waves look good tonight.
And that's exactly what a group of teens were doing on August 14th, 1978, including 16-year-old Barbara Natanis. Barbara had gone down to the beach that night with her boyfriend Jim Alt, who was 17, and a few friends. They had a bonfire going, were hanging out, laughing, talking, watching the ocean.
Apparently, they were hoping to go surfing at some point too, but the waves were too calm. Which, I mean, it's been said that they were quite irritated about that. And it it's like you imagine these teenagers getting irritated about calm waves, something so normal, completely unaware that they were about to have the worst night of their lives. It makes this whole case so much harder to process. I mean, they were just having a normal night, irritated by mundane things, completely unaware if the dark turn things were about to take.
Yeah, that detail, it really does hit differently once you know what happens later. At the time, it probably just felt like a normal, slightly boring beach night.
And as often happens, at some point, the friends they were with got tired and they decided they were going to go and sleep in their car. And that left Barbara and Jim on the beach. They rolled out their sleeping bags and decided to sleep right there on the sand under the stars. And it sounds quite romantic. I mean, the ocean breeze, quiet waves. Until you remember, this is a true crime podcast and nothing good happens next.
So the next morning around 6 a.m., Jim woke up and realized something was very wrong. He was covered in blood and seawater. His head was pounding. He was confused, disoriented, and he had absolutely no idea what had happened. And when he reached out beside him, Barbara wasn't there.
And I mean, that detail alone must have been terrifying in itself. But Jim was also seriously injured. He just didn't realize how badly yet.
Despite that, he somehow managed to stand up, make his way over to his car where all the friends were sleeping. He woke them up and told them he couldn't find Barbara. And then he collapsed, which is when everyone realized something had gone very, very wrong.
Yeah, at that point, everyone went into panic mode. One of the friends ran off to contact the police, while the other started helping to search the beach. And people nearby started helping too, because at that point, they're probably thinking she just wandered off, maybe went for a walk or something.
Exactly. They likely had no idea that the reality was going to be so much worse. Let's be real here. No one really ever thinks the worst straight off the bat. You are never thinking worst case scenario unless you have lived through a trauma. Then we jump straight to 10. But you push those aside and worst case scenarios are at the back of your mind. You hold on to hope that maybe everyone's just confused and she's wandered off and it's going to be fine.
However, in this instance, that hope was quickly shattered because not long after the search started, someone found Barbara. And she wasn't far from where she and Jim had been sleeping, but the scene was absolutely horrific.
So Barbara was lying naked on the sand. She was covered in blood, and her body was positioned spread eagle, and her head had been propped up on a log.
Which is such a strange and disturbing detail. Like, whoever did this and arranged her body, it's not like this was accidental.
No, no, this was deliberate, and the injuries were really severe. She had a fractured skull. One of her breasts had been cut off. Sand had been shoved into her mouth. She had been sexually assaulted. She had been beaten and strangled to death.
Yeah, this is one of those crime scenes where investigators instantly know they're dealing with something extremely violent and likely someone who's very, very dangerous.
Meanwhile, Jim was taken to the hospital where doctors discovered he had suffered severe head trauma. Like we said, he had woken up with the blood, and this is when he realizes how severely he's injured. Investigators were later able to determine that he had been beaten with rocks and burning logs from the bonfire.
Which is also pretty brutal. I mean, the injuries were so severe that Jim ended up in a coma for months. And when he eventually woke up, he couldn't remember anything that happened after he and Barbara had went to sleep that night.
Which means the one person who might have seen the killer, who might have been an eyewitness, he really couldn't help investigators at all during this time.
And I mean, that's got to be incredibly frustrating for investigators, but also traumatic for Jim.
Unfortunately, the investigation didn't get very far. There were no witnesses, no clear suspects, and very little evidence. Eventually, Barbara's case went cold, which was heartbreaking for her family.
And then we jump to 6 years later when something happened that made people look back at Barbara's case again. On August 23rd of 1984, another teenage girl was murdered on that same beach.
Her name was Claire Huff, and she was only 14 years old. So Claire had been visiting her grandmother near Torrey Pines, and at some point during the night, she snuck out and went for a walk along the beach. And let me just apologize to you, Allie. My dog is here acting like a clown because he wants some attention, and he has hit my notes twice. So I'm sorry.
I'm totally on board. I don't know if you can hear it in the recording, but my cats keep chasing each other around the room, and all I can hear is banging and clattering, and it's like, why? In the brief moments I take to record, that's when you choose to be playful.
I just thought you were unloading your dishwasher.
No, 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 no. This is the torment of having as many cats as I do.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to sidetrack from this very, very horrific, serious thing, but I promise I'm not aloof. I'm very on track. My dog just doesn't want me to be. Ah,
Okay, so I'm right. I'm not focusing on my cats. I'm focusing on the case.
right.
And I mean, I'm just gonna try and get myself back in the zone because not you. My cats have completely thrown us off at this point. So right now we're talking about Claire, who had, gone out for that walk, which I mean, it's such a normal teenager thing to do. But unfortunately, sometimes those normal moments, like in this case, end in tragedy.
Which in this case they did. The next morning, Claire's body was found in the sand, and investigators noticed something disturbing. Her injuries were very similar to Barbara's.
Yeah, Claire had also been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. And just like Barbara, one of her breasts had been removed.
That's such a specific and disturbing similarity. You would expect investigators to immediately link those cases. Surely somebody's reading the paper. It would trigger a thought. Hey, this happened a few years, but I don't know.
I mean, yeah, in not just investigators, I think most people who are hearing this story for the first time or have heard it before thought the exact same thing. But we'll get there, and it's not the outcome we would assume.
So, for decades, both cases remained unsolved until 2014. That's when advances in DNA testing finally helped investigators identify suspects in Claire's murder. The DNA pointed to Ronald Clyde Tatro and Kevin Charles Brown.
Tatro had died in a boating accident 3 years earlier, but he did have a history of sexual offence arrests and convictions. And Kevin Brown's involvement, that shocked people because at the time of Claire's murder, he'd been working in the San Diego Police Department's crime lab.
And that's terrifying in its own way. When anyone who's involved in law enforcement is connected to a crime of that nature, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and when Brown realised he'd been identified as a suspect, he wasn't going to sit around and wait to see what happened. Instead, he took his own life before any charges could be filed.
So, despite all the similarities between the two crimes, investigators ultimately concluded that Barbara's murder was not connected to Claire's, which meant that although the people responsible for Claire's death have been named, if neither can face justice, Barbara's murder still remains unsolved. This is one of those cases that sits with you after hearing it. And I think that's your little adorable British trope I will steal today. It just sits with you. And the brutality alone, like that's horrifying. But the unanswered questions for me are what keep me up at night.
Yeah, because when you hear about both murders not only happening on the same beach, but in such a similar way, you kind of expect the story to end with an investigator has discovered it was the same killer. But instead, in this one, we get the opposite.
Right, the crimes are eerily similar, but investigators say they can't definitively connect them. Like, I understand that investigators have to rely on evidence, not just gut feelings, but as a listener, as a citizen, like, you can't help but thinking about it.
I mean, exactly, because, I mean, let's be honest, the similarities are pretty striking. Same beach, young female victims, sexual assault, beaten, strangled, and then the incredibly specific and disturbing detail that one of the breasts were removed in both cases. I mean, that's not exactly a common feature in homicide cases.
No, it really truly isn't. And you and I go through, I mean, maybe I'm a little rough on my numbers, but we go through at least 1,000 of them a year. We find out these new details. Oh my gosh. And that's not something you hear of often. It's the kind of detail that investigators look at when they're trying to identify one of these signature behaviors, something the offender does that goes beyond just committing the crime that makes them stand out.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard not to still wonder whether these two cases could somehow be connected in a way that investigators were just unable to prove.
Especially when you consider the time gap. Like 6 years isn't that unusual in cases where someone commits violent crimes and then stops and then moves somewhere else and resumes or is incarcerated for a period of time.
I mean, even it could just be that they got lucky and avoided detection and held off until the next time the urge hit. I mean, we've seen that quite a lot in the cases we cover and research. I mean, serial offenders don't always commit crimes close together. Sometimes there really are quite big gaps in between.
Right. And we also need to remember that Barbara's case happened in 1978 when forensic technology was in its infancy. It was nowhere near what it is today, which means if certain evidence wasn't collected correctly back then, or if it had been degrading over time, investigators might never be able to test it now. It just might not be usable evidence.
Exactly, and that's one of the most frustrating things about older cases. Sometimes the answers might have existed at the time, but the technology and the way things were investigated, I mean, it just wasn't quite there yet.
Another thing that stands out to me is how vulnerable those two situations were. Two teenagers sleeping on a beach. I'm sure to them, with their friends nearby in a car, in a place they were familiar with, they felt safe.
I mean, yeah, they probably did, but as much as they felt safe, they were completely exposed.
Yeah, it's one of those reminders that the world can be unpredictable in ways we don't always think about. It also makes what happened to Jim incredibly tragic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he survived something horrific, spent months in a coma, and then woke up without any memory of what had happened.
And that's going to be incredibly difficult to live with. Not knowing what happened during one of the most traumatic moments in your life, and then further going through your life thinking, okay, now if I try these alternative therapies and could recall these memories, do I want to do that? And your body just having these trauma responses that you can't heal because you truly don't know what's happened.
I mean, yeah, I can't imagine knowing that you were the last person with someone who was so brutally murdered. And we've got to remember this was his girlfriend, so someone he cared about. And he was the last person who probably saw who killed, like, who was responsible, who beat him, who killed her. I mean, that's got to be such a heavy thing to carry on his shoulders.
It really it really is. It's hard to be a survivor. And for Barbara's family, the hardest part, I think, is that the case is still unresolved. Claire's family eventually got answers through DNA, but Barbara's case is in limbo. It's still waiting, and it's so unfortunate.
Yeah, and that is why cold cases like this really do matter. Because sometimes breakthroughs happen decades later. I mean, technology improves, evidence gets retested, and sometimes new witnesses can even come forward.
And sometimes all it takes is the right person hearing about the case and realizing that they know something. Maybe they were a child at the time. Maybe they remember even a small detail from some obnoxious jerk at a party who was running his mouth. And it can make a difference.
I mean, yeah, I think we'll all just have to hold on to the hope that one day Barbara's case will get that same kind of breakthrough. Because every victim deserves answers.
And every family deserves the chance to see justice being served.
Alright, that's the episode. I mean, another true crime to ruin vacation spots for you really, really fast.
Despite my dog trying to sabotage this episode, I've decided I am not going camping without him again. I mean, imagine walking down a beach and suddenly your brain goes, didn't someone get murdered here in 1978? That's my life. Like, every time I go camping in the Rockies, I'm like, okay, who's been eaten by a mountain lion around here? And then I have to go through my Rolodex, or who's been found murdered in this area. So I don't like my beach vacations or mountain vacations or any vacations narrated that way.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely an occupational hazard. And also, side note, if I ever say let's sleep on a beach under the stars, please remind me that we run a true crime podcast.
I will be the first. I'll be like, nope, we've covered this one before, remember?
I mean, exactly. It's all a lesson learned. Beach sunsets are fine. Sleeping there overnight? Yeah, definitely not.
All right, that's officially the most paranoid safety advice we have ever given, but I will stand by it. Like, be safe, not sorry.
I
Reasonable.
Yeah, it's definitely the most paranoid, but also still valid, still needed to be heard, and very, very reasonable.
Fair enough. Okay, Monty wants out of the room to go bark at the neighbors. So everybody have a great day. Stay safe out there.
If this episode stayed with you, make sure you're following Morbidium so you never miss a story. And if you have a moment, leave a rating and review. It truly helps us reach more listeners and keeps these names from being forgotten. Share this episode with someone who cares about this truth. The more we talk about these cases, the harder they are to ignore. Thank you for spending your time with us, for listening with empathy, and for being part of a community that values justice over spectacle. Until next time, stay curious and stay compassionate.